Time from 2014, one Speeding into the Future from 1961. Assuming they are traveling at approximately the same warp speed, they would collide at around 1988, the year Pan Am Flight 103 exploded over Lockerbie, Scotland, and an earthquake in Armenia killed 60,000 people. These are the uncanny transtemporal ballistics of the mind's eyeballs, and this is one of the things we, my mother and I, mean by gone with the mind. Okay, just a little background before I get started. Gone with the Mind was originally going to be an autobiography in the form of a first-person shooter flight simulator game, and it was going to start at a breakfast meeting with my old editor Michael Peach, during which I'm either assassinated or commit suicide in the men's room. And my ghost has to travel back in time, revisit each transformative event in my life, and execute, or otherwise degrade or disable, the central dramatis personae in order to get to the next, or prior, event. The goal of the game is to successfully reach my mother's womb, in which I attempt to unravel or unzip my father's and mother's DNA in the zygote, which will free me of having to eternally repeat this life. And I'm ferried from event to event by Benito Mussolini, who pilots a flying balcony. And along the way, he offers counsel and gaming advice, kind of like Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita or like Virgil in Dante's Inferno. And if the player succeeds in unknitting the entirety of his, or my, life, thus flinging himself into utter oblivion, into the ontological black hole, or to put a more positive spin on it, reintegrating himself into the oceanic void, he wins. I think an autobiography, in the form of a first-person shooter game that ends with unraveling the zygote in your mother's uterus, sounds really cool. And Michael and pretty much everyone I mentioned it to also thought it sounded really cool. But what is that actually? I mean, what would a book like that actually be, you know? Once you start thinking about sitting down and actually writing something, it's an entirely different matter. But I remained totally committed to doing it because that's just the kind of person I am. I'm not going to bail on something I said I was going to do. I think I'm a sort of exceedingly boring person, which certainly doesn't make me the best candidate for an autobiography. I mean, boring in that I'm very dutiful, very responsible. And if I say I'm going to write an autobiography in the form of a first-person shooter game that ends with unraveling the zygote in your mother's uterus, then I'm going to write an autobiography in the form of a first-person shooter game that ends with unraveling the zygote in your mother's uterus, and that's that. And I expect that of other people too, by the way. If you say you're going to be in the schoolyard waiting for me in a certain place at a certain time, then be at that place at that time. Don't send some proxy who doesn't even know where the hell to wait. You know what I mean? If you say you're going to stay overnight with me at the hospital when I get my tonsils out, then stay overnight at the hospital, for God's sake. I said I'm an exceedingly boring person. I don't really think that. I think I'm a sort of weird composite of thrill-seeking heedlessness and crippling hyperanxiety. I mean, I've taken LSD before a root canal. But I'm equally capable of calling the police and area hospitals if my wife is even 5 minutes late coming home from a pedicure, so... At some point in this preliminary stage, when I'm still trying to figure out what this book could actually be, the imaginary intern appears, which changes everything.